Hey YouTube, I didn't see you there. Oh wait, I did! Hey YouTube, what is up? It's Jackson here, and today I'd like to tell you we did it. We hit the 1 like. And I know that you guys are gonna be like, dude, it's just 1 like, but it's still awesome that I know that you guys are there. And yeah, the fact that I hit 5 likes, I have 1 like on my video. I know it's not much, but the fact that 1 person actually took the time to like the video, it doesn't even matter. I'm feeling awesome right now. But if we could hit 5 or 3 likes, that'd be amazing. That'd send me through the roof miles, knowing that a channel with no subscribers with a video that got 3 likes. So if we could do that, that'd be awesome. You know what? I'm so happy right now. I'm just gonna go upload it right now. Let's go, people. Come on. Just follow me on Twitter and go sign up for MSA and subscribe and like, because that's all I need. And then I'm gonna go through the roof again. I already went through the roof. You know what? Do you want me proof? You want proof? Yeah, I went through the roof. Yeah. Peace out. See ya.
Oh, wow. I just love his enthusiasm. I wish I was that enthusiastic about things. Oh my gosh, so how cute was that? Well, good morning. We are so glad that you guys are here today. My name is Jordan Wickland. I'm the stage manager here at Clarkston, Kensington. And this is Tim Keister, and he's got a couple people up here with him. You want to kind of share?
Yeah, we got some awesome volunteers. Hey, before I get into them, I want to let you guys know on July 13th, 14th, and 15th up at Spring Hill, we got an awesome family event going on called Rock Your Family. And I know that there's people in here that have been impacted by Smash. There's people that have been impacted in here by Wild Retreat and Man Up. This is one of those events where we can come together and bring that all as a family on mission. And we're asking for you guys to really tee up and invite your family out and enjoy that experience together. The other thing I want to talk about, and I brought a lot of volunteers up here, is next weekend on the 3rd, for those of you guys that volunteer here at this campus, we're doing a volunteer appreciation event after second service. And we'll be outside barbecuing, eating some specialty donuts, just to tell you a little bit about it, and we're excited. The other thing we have coming up is Stand in the Gap. And it's an area where you guys can jump in and serve in K-Kids ministry. And we also like to promote a little bit our other ministries as well, Breakaway and Edge. But rather than me giving you a sales pitch about why it'd be awesome to jump in, I have Casper and Julia and Katie and Kevin and Haven and Tim. And they're going to be out in the lobby after first and second service. And if you have in your heart maybe this burn and this desire to see what it would be like, come hear why they serve in those areas, all right? Come check us out.
I love that. So awesome. Thank you guys so much. These are like some of my favorite people, so just go say hi to them too, because they're so awesome. Another really neat thing that we have coming up June 3rd and June 10th is that Sue Anderson is going to be doing a couple prayer workshops. And she was here a couple months ago. Amazing job. This woman has deeply impacted my life, has prayed with me multiple times, and she is going to be doing a workshop on strongholds on June 3rd, praying over strongholds that are affecting your life and holding you down. And then on the 10th, she's going to be talking about having an unoffendable heart, which I don't know about you, but I think that is so incredibly relevant. This day and age, I feel like you really can't say anything without offending somebody. And I probably just offended you by saying that. But I have heard a couple of people who have been to this workshop that she's done, and it's incredible. So it's going to be first service, again, June 3rd and June 10th in the LGI room. You'll probably see signs, but what a great opportunity to really just kind of pour into yourself too and hear from her. And you could go to first service, to that prayer workshop and then come to second service for the actual service. So super excited about that. And then also we have just so many things that happen here at Kensington as a whole with all these campuses and global partners. And so we wanted to take just a couple minutes to show you guys what's been happening this year. So check this out.
It has been another incredible year at Kensington. We have heard countless stories of people's lives being transformed by the redeeming love of Jesus. We have been given endless opportunities to participate in bringing love to people here in our local communities and all around the world. And we have watched couples, families, and individual people, just like you and me, make life-altering decisions to trust Jesus with their entire lives. It's impossible to fully measure the movement of God through a place like Kensington. We would like to take a moment, however, to reflect and remember what God has been doing in and through all of us.
We know without a doubt that people matter to God, and a lot of people came through the doors at Kensington this year. We saw over 782,000 people attend a service, with over 75,000 showing up to just Christmas and Easter alone. We saw an average of 1,700 leaders inspired to embrace God's calling and lead strong at our 2 leadership gathering events. We also saw 997 women attend the Smash Retreat, 809 men get together for the Man Up Retreat, and 127 families dive deeper into their faith at our Rock Your Family Retreat this year. Sometimes showing up to church doesn't even require getting out of your pajamas in the morning. That's because one of the most exciting and fastest growing ways to connect with people has been through our digital department. We continue to expand our reach with content being created for Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and of course, KensingtonChurch.org. There have been over 50,000 streams of our services this year and over 3.6 million minutes of video played on our YouTube channel alone. Kensington is rapidly growing online with opportunities to engage and connect with people 24/7.
At first glance, a church like Kensington might feel too big and overwhelming to develop deep and meaningful relationships. But that certainly wasn't the case for the 4,800 of you guys that plugged into one of our 542 groups. This year, we saw 712 people discover a safe place to ask tough questions and grow in their relationship with Jesus in our Alpha classes. An average of 250 per week found healing and support through a confidential Bible-based recovery program called Celebrate Recovery. And more than 900 of you guys walked, ran, or cycled to support Hope Water Project. As a result, 17 wells have been drilled in Kenya, bringing clean drinking water to 32,000 poka. It was an honor for our teams to publicly baptize over 525 people at one of our 7 campuses this year. Altogether, you guys have spent 197,515 hours volunteering at Kensington, paving the way for the one to have an encounter with Jesus. Students had an incredible year at Kensington with 451 kids participating in Breakaway, 402 in Edge, and over 1,000 students going on a retreat or short-term trip. Giving to Kensington is as strong as it has ever been, with our general fund coming in at $19.3 million. When you add pledges and donations to the Everyone Capital campaign, this year's giving was up to a staggering $25 million. That's 29% over and above regular giving at Kensington to fund projects like the Clinton Township Building, global and local partners, and more.
So did you know that nearly $5 million was sent out to local and global outreach this past year? This is because we believe that God is constantly raising up leaders full of fresh ideas to reach people in their local communities. It is part of Kensington's mission to support these leaders with resources to see their God-given callings become realities. This year, through your generous giving to the Everyone campaign, we saw Clinton Michael Dupin launch East Town Church in the San Francisco Bay Area. We also helped Colin and Liz Harfield plant Anthem Church, where we believe thousands of families will have an encounter with Jesus in the Boston area. To this date, Kensington has supported over 59 church plants in the U.S., with over $250,000 donated this past year alone. We have also made huge steps to support local schools. Across all of our campuses, we had over 21,000 school supply items donated to our 13 school partners, helping students in need start the school year with the tools they need to learn. We sent over 500 gift bags to teachers in the district, showing them that they are loved and valued. Over 3,000 students saw their peers perform at Kaleo School assemblies this year. Kaleo has launched arts programs in 6 different schools to invest in the students' creative gifts and instill identity into these artists as world changers.
When we hear about people in our communities that are in need, we step up and we move out into action, responding directly to 465 households in crisis. This year, the Full Throttle Ministry refurbished and gave away 2 vehicles to people needing reliable transportation. Over the holidays, 2,000 Thanksgiving baskets were handed out to provide dinner to over 8,000 people in our local communities. All of Kensington's campuses rallied together this past year to support communities that were ripped apart by tragedy. Close to $70,000 was raised to go to hurricane relief efforts in Texas, and $20,000 was sent to Las Vegas to help one of our own church plant partners care for people following the Vegas shooting.
Kensington's impact stretches far beyond U.S. borders. Many of our brothers and sisters in Christ are doing incredible work to share the message of Jesus in often hostile environments. Your support of these ministries has paid huge dividends and allowed 1,083 churches to be planted internationally. We have reports of over 42,500 people committing their lives to Christ, with 4,300 baptisms. Kensington now has 10 global partners spanning the globe, from Kenya, India, Haiti, Israel, Palestine, Cuba, Egypt, Nepal, South Sudan, Afghanistan, and Brazil, with more relationships being developed right now. No Child is our child sponsorship program that saw 318 children newly sponsored this year in Kenya, India, and Nepal. 45 Nepalese girls were sponsored during the Man Up retreat alone. 451 girls were rescued from human trafficking in Nepal. 23 of these girls were able to file legal cases against their traffickers. Many of these rescued girls have been rehabilitated and sent out into their communities as an ambassador for trafficking awareness.
As Kensington embarks on its 28th year of seeing everyone transformed and mobilized by Jesus, we are not slowing down. God's doing amazing things through those that he brings through the doors here. And if you're seeing this now in a service or online, you need to know that it's because of your faithfulness, your support, and your prayers that these stories are being told. All along the way, God has sent the right person at the right time to do the thing that advances his kingdom forward. And we believe that these resources never run out, because the greatest resource is people. God's provision is you. And as we look forward to this year, we are humbled and excited to see what God will do through this community next. Thanks for another great year.
Wow. Oh, kind of overwhelming, huh? Just look at those numbers and I'm just blown away. I have grown up in this church my entire life. I was here at the beginning when there were 40 people. For those of you who don't know Kensington's story, it started with 40 people. And to look at those numbers now and what God has done in this place is just unreal. And like Steve said, it's because of people like you partnering with us that 42,000 people across the world accepting Christ. It's just unreal. Man, I just love that video so much. Well, again, like I said, we're so glad you guys are here today, and we are in our second week of our Defining Moment series. Kind of a special treat for you guys today. Drew Daniels, who's our director of our Young Adults 1829 ministry, is here to do the message. And I know Drew through my brother Davey, and he and his wife Nat have really mentored and been such an incredible friend to Davey over the last 4 years. So I am super geeked to have you guys here with us and to hear from you. But before we get started, if you guys could just stand up, say hello to a couple people, we'll go ahead and get started.
Well, hey everyone, good morning. How are you? As Jordan said, my name is Drew Daniels, and I love what I get to do. I work with young adults between the ages of 18 and 29. And just so that you know a little bit about me before we kind of get going today, I've been on staff at Kensington for about 4 years. About 3 of those years, I was working with teenagers and high school students in our EDGE program, holla Tim Keister. And it was just an amazing time. And so for the past year, me and my wife Natalie, who I've been married to for about 2 years, we've been working with the 18-29 age range. And in fact, actually since this past February, we've gone weekly every single Thursday night with our young adults for about the past 4 months. And we've already had over 150 young adults attending every single week. So if you're a young adult or know someone, man, we would love to just meet you or say hey at some point today. So hey, I'm really excited for this series. It's called Defining Moments, and it's where we take a story from one of our teaching pastors all across Kensington. And this week, it's Danny Cox, who's one of our teaching pastors at our Troy campus. And I love Danny because he's a guy who's believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself. And he's a guy who, as he teaches on stage, you see his heart, and you'll see it kind of through his story today. But he teaches with his heart, and he's the same guy on stage as he is off of the stage. And his heart is just so pure in his love for Jesus. And so his defining moment was a defining moment of faith when it seemed like God wasn't providing a way, and he just had to trust him in the middle of a mystery. And so let's check this out together before we get going.
In the summer of 2004, my wife Amy and I got baptized. And she later told me when we came out of the water that God told her, get ready. You're really going to start on this incredible adventure. So 6 months later, Amy and I found ourselves in this tiny little fishing village in Honduras called Amoa at an all-girls orphanage that we were serving there on our first mission trip. And I got to go there the very first day we were there and meet all the girls, and they're just unbelievable. It's probably 30 girls ranging from 4 years old all the way up to 17. And so I fell in love with the girls, and then for 3 days, Amy worked in the orphanage, and I worked somewhere else apart from that. And when we came back together at the orphanage for the next time, Amy said to me, I've fallen in love with a few of these girls. Amazingly enough, I named the girls. We felt like God was calling us to these 3 girls. And so all that trip, we kept praying. We prayed with our team, and we felt for sure that the Lord was leading us this way. So then we fly home, and the closer we get to home, we're thinking, what are we doing? We are nuts. We had a lot of things happen before our trip that put us into real hardship financially. We had no money to our name. I'm not kidding. We probably had maybe $1,000 to $2,000 to our name. They're telling us it's going to cost tens of thousands of dollars to adopt these 3 girls, and we have no way of knowing how that's going to happen. But we kept pushing forward, and there's a few things that happened when we got home that just led us down the path, and we started the process. And so we got to the spring of 2008. And I came home one day and opened up the mail. It was a big package, opened it up. And inside the package, as I pulled it out, was just a big stamp on our adoption paperwork that said denied. The United States government had denied our adoption. And I just remember being filled with sadness and fear and everything else. And I called my wife and I'm like, you are not gonna believe this. The United States government has denied our adoption because it's taken too long. And she's like, no, they didn't. There's no way. And I'm just like, Amy, I'm telling you, I'm looking right at it. I'm looking with my own eyes. I see it. They've denied our adoption. And I'll never forget what she said. She said, Danny, there's no way God would have brought us this far to deny this adoption. It's not true, Danny. It's not true. And so we really wrestled with that for several weeks. We decided to take our 2 boys out for a long vacation. We had never taken a family vacation. And so we took a 2-week vacation in June of that year. When we came back, a couple weeks later, we got a phone call from our lawyer, Vanessa, in Honduras, and she was all excited. She's like, you're never gonna believe it. Guess what? The Honduran government has approved your adoption. They're ready to go. You just need to fly down and adopt your daughters. And we hung up the phone and looked at each other and like, are you kidding me? So now Honduras has said yes, and the United States has said no. And we had no idea what to do. And we prayed and we talked, and we both felt like God was saying, listen, I asked you to adopt these girls. I'm asking you to keep your promise. Go and do what I asked you to do. You promised them you'd adopt them and make them your daughters. Go. Man, what a pivotal moment in our life. So we crazy, man. We were like, let's go. And we bought our tickets. August of that year, our two boys, Amy and I, flew down to Honduras to adopt our girls, having no idea how we were going to get them home. And so we got there, and we got to the capital of Honduras, Tegucigalpa. We were in the judge's chambers, and all of this paperwork was happening, and they have to speak everything out. And so they're speaking it out. They can't say our last name. They're just saying, Amy and Danny Cooks. And they would say our name really funny each time. We'd laugh, and then they would give us the paperwork, and we'd have to sign it. Each time we signed, we just looked at each other knowing we don't know what's going to happen. So we signed it all. Here's our 3 daughters and our 2 boys. And Vanessa says, hey, why don't you go stand over there and get a picture taken? And so we take that picture. And that moment symbolizes such faith, because only Amy and I knew in that moment we had no idea how our girls were ever going to get home. And so after that picture was taken, we went to our lawyer and we said, hey, Vanessa, we got to let you know something. We have no way to get our daughters home. The United States government has denied our adoption. And she's like, what are you doing? Are you crazy? Why did you do that? And we was like, well, God told us to do it, so we're doing it. And so we left, we got in our hotel room, and Amy and I started talking and praying, and we're saying, what's our plan? And so we decided that Amy was gonna stay there with our daughters, because I couldn't stay there as an American male with 3 Honduran girls in a hotel room. So Amy stayed there with them, and I took the 2 boys, our 2 boys, and took them home and got them in school. And for 2.5 months, we kept kind of fighting from both ends on how to get the girls home. And Amy was working on the Honduran end, I was working on the U.S. government side. And I had made some connections with some government officials here. Amy was working on that side, but we had no idea what was happening. And by late October, tensions were high, we were frustrated, nothing was happening. And then all of a sudden, Amy called and says, you're never gonna believe it, but we're approved. We have 3 visas. We're coming home. November 2nd, we're coming home. Gosh, we still to this day do not know exactly how that happened. We really believe it was just absolutely a miracle. And the image that I have in my mind is my youngest son. He was probably 6 years old, and he's kneeling at the airport in front of these glass doors, and the escalator is going up. And he's kneeling there as a little kid, waiting for his mom and his new sisters to come. And he stayed there, I'm not kidding you, for about a half an hour. He just knelt and looked at that escalator, waiting for them. And when they came down that escalator, the joy on his face, and I thought, that's faith. That's the image of faith that's burned into my mind. Kneeling, looking up, and waiting. And sometimes that's what we have to do. And I'll never forget that moment when we had no idea what God was gonna do. We couldn't see what he was doing, but he had a plan far beyond what we can imagine.
Man, it's just such a powerful moment, and I just can't tell you how inspired I am every single time I've heard the story now with Danny. Just the risk of taking such a huge faith risk in your life when there's no sense of certainty, you know, of the outcome. And I think that this is where so many of us live our lives. And so before we kind of get going today, talking and responding and looking at this idea of faith in the middle of our uncertainty, I just love to pray for our time together. And especially because this is Memorial Day weekend. And my father, actually, he was a veteran of the Vietnam War. And so I have a special place in my heart for all those who have served in our military and armed forces throughout our nation's history. And there's so many men and women who have lost their lives defending the rights that we have in this beautiful nation. So I'm going to go ahead and pray. And I'd love for you to join me, and we'll take a moment of silence for those who have fallen in our country. If you'd like to bow your heads with me. Dear Heavenly Father, we're just so grateful that you are in our midst. And I just pray over today that you'd be really speaking to so many of us in our hearts in ways that we're prepared to listen to your voice and the voice of the Holy Spirit that's speaking to us. And God, that you'd encourage us to take these faith steps. And God, we just want to say thank you to the people who have served this country and honor those who have been lost along the way to protect the rights and the freedoms that we have in this country. So just in this time, God, we just want to honor them with a moment of silence. And so, Father, just today, as we honor and remember all of those who've taken great risks, God, let us be encouraged to take great risks in our life as well. In your name we pray. Amen. Well, I'd love to, in this moment, invite the ushers down to receive our offering. If you are new here with us at Kensington, there's no obligation to participate. You can feel free to let this moment pass. It's for those of us who call Kensington home, who want to give generously to see all the mission of Kensington that's happened. Is that for me and my wife, we actually give electronically, so it comes out every month. And it's just really amazing to feel that as we are generous with our finances, to see how God blesses those in return. So today, I want to talk about, in light of Danny's story, I want to talk about this idea of the mystery of life. Because all of us, in some portion of our life, we live in this sense of mystery, and the sense of the unknown, where the outcomes of life are uncertain. And I think if you're like me, or you've been a Jesus follower, or whether you've been coming to church for a long time, I think all of us have one thing in common, is that all of us have a love-hate relationship with mystery. Is that we love mystery. For those of us who are married or dating in here, one of my favorite times in my life was when I began to date my wife, because it was just so exciting. She had this amazing internet presence, and so I would just stalk her and crazy, and just there was no picture I didn't see. And it was like she was just so mysterious, and I wonder what she's going to be posting next. And the reason why so many of us love mystery is because we love the step-by-step process of discovery, of learning the little nuances of the secrets of life, and that's what makes life so exciting, is that it is, in fact, a mystery. However, we also, all of us in here, we have a hate relationship with mystery, because if there's no discovery, and you've kind of, had moments of your life where you felt like you're discovering more secrets of life, and then there maybe comes a point, and this has happened in my life, where you have no more answers. There are no more breakthroughs. You're sitting in a season of pain in your life, and there's just no discovery, there's no answers, there's no way to make sense of what's going on in your life. And so when it's only mystery, all of a sudden there's just intense feelings of anxiety. Is that mystery with no discovery at all only brings us misery and anxiety. And you even see this kind of in your faith if you've ever explored your relationship with God. It's in the highlights of our faith when you have the most discovery. Like I remember, for me, I gave my life to Jesus when I was in high school, when I was a freshman in high school. So if you have a high school student, my mom forced me to go. And so that's why I always say to moms, you go force your kid to go see Tim Keiser after service. Because it saved my life, and maybe they'll have a man bun and elvish pastor boots and be standing on stage talking about you and thanking you in the future. And so for me, it was when I was in 9th grade, and we went to this big conference, and it was in Detroit, it was in Ford Field, and the pastor, he's talking about, you don't want to live your life in the mud of life. And he did this thing, as every pastor do, as I've learned to do, and you get on your knee. He's like, if anybody, you want to give your life to Christ, I want you to stand up and just say, I want the cross. I'm going to whisper, just leading you to the place, just knowing that you can give up just by my whisper of my voice, just being so tender. And sure enough, I was like, oh no, and people are just being bold. They're like, I want the cross. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, oh no, God's doing something in my life, and he's stirring, and I'm feeling that kind of pressure of like, I want to give my life to Christ. And sure enough, I'm like, I do it, and I'm like, I want the cross. And sure enough, I kid you not, my identical twin brother stands up at the exact same time as me and screams, I want the cross. And I'm like, I can't even have my own salvation. Come on. And it was in that moment where I genuinely gave my life to Christ, and I remember kind of going home with some of my friends that night, because there's a day 2 of the conference, and I felt just so righteous and good. It was like It was the greatest portion of discovery of the reality of God in my life, that he really was that close, he really was that good, his love was really that real. And I remember just kind of being like, do I have superpowers now? And I'd Obi-Wan Kenobi things. I was like, oh, Christians still have to use doors. Okay, here we go. And I think all of us in our lives, when we have the greatest amounts of discovery, that's the highlights of our faith. And likewise, the opposite is true, is when we have the most mystery, that's actually the lowest parts of our faith, when there is no answer, and you're just living your life in the unknown. You're living your life in the uncertainty of life. And this is where many of us, we just get stuck. In fact, for me, as I gave my life to Christ in 9th grade, I was one of those kind of kids who, I wanted to be obedient to God, and so all throughout high school, man, I tried to stay away from all the party scenes and the drinking and the dating and all that kind of thing. And my parents got divorced when I was 10, and so I made it this kind of life goal that I wasn't going to become them, and so I became a radical Jesus follower in high school, and then into college, I felt like the Lord really met me, and I was in this really intense faith community, and I was really just walking in step with him. And then it was my junior year of college at Michigan State, which is God's university. he met me so profoundly. And I just felt like, man, the God of the universe is literally talking to me. And it felt like that. And I felt like it was just like the answer. And I hate saying this because I know that this wasn't true. But of course, like when you're in the moment and you're a young man or a young woman, it's like I believed like I had arrived. Like this intimacy, this closeness with God was how life for everyone and always was supposed to be. And of course, I finally started dating a girl. And then it turned into my senior year of college at Michigan State. And I broke up with this girl, as you do. Your faith kind of crumbles in the process. And it was inside of this where I began to maybe question everything that I had been hearing from God and just wondering. And then I took 3 courses at Michigan State that were all Bible courses taught by an atheist professor. At the time, I didn't know it because he wasn't mean or a jerk about anything, but rather he was just kind of unpacking the Bible in a different way and began to present the Bible from a person who just kind of sees it as literature. And for me, as somebody who's maybe been more of a thinker and a questioner and a skeptic kind of growing up, and for me, this was devastating to my heart because for me, I wanted to give my life away to God. I'd pondered going into ministry and being on stage with long hair and elvish pastor boots and talking to people about God. And so for me, this was like devastating and just really hurt my heart. And by all accounts, at this time in my life, I felt like an atheist. I felt like I'd actually really given up on God. And at the time, I probably wouldn't have ever used that language. But like that's what happened. That was my reality, is that there's no answer that someone could give. There was no breakthrough. Like I just am like looking at like biblical reliability and historicity issues and like the voice of God and systematic theology. And I'm like, look at all this stuff and it like doesn't make sense anymore the way that it maybe did, because for me, I could like explain all of it. And it was in this kind of portion of my life when I was 21 years old, it felt like God had died. And maybe for you, you didn't, and like for me, I intellectualized myself right out of my faith, but maybe for you, it wasn't that, but maybe it was actually like some sort of loss in your life, and you're just going through this grief, and it legitimately puts a question and a seed of doubt in your heart and in your life of like, a good God wouldn't do this. And now that this has happened to me, I can't imagine that everyone else, that God would do this just across the board, or questioning his goodness. And all of us maybe have some questions like this in our hearts somewhere, but some of you have been through seasons or issues and tough questions in your life where it's like, man, I'm beginning to doubt everything because of what? It's the mystery. There's no breakthrough. There's no discovery. There's no answer. There's no, and Christians love giving Bible verses, and it's like, no, I don't need another Bible verse, man. It's like, no, like I need God to meet me in the middle of the mystery. And for so many of us, it's when we sit inside of this unknown and we can't get these answers and we don't really know what to pursue. We have all these emotions that what begins to happen is we actually begin to deny the story that we are living in. We begin to deny that what's happening to us is really happening to us. We begin to deny that how we feel is really how we feel. And we kind of do this thing where we open up at about 50% of our issues. And so we cover up our pain and we mask it, and then we occasionally confess it to people, only to maybe feel like, once again, we get Bible verses back or someone's life advice from all their years of wisdom of being a Jesus follower, and maybe for some of us, this is the whole reason why we never even engaged in our faith to begin with. And so we begin to deny our story, and in fact, sometimes our pain, it becomes a personal identity instead of just being a part of our story. And so maybe for some of us in here, if you're beginning to question God's goodness and you're in the middle of the mystery and you're like, well, I'm just a purity issue, and this is just my identity. Or I have a singleness issue, and this is my identity. It's not even a part of my story. Like, this is who I am at this point. And for me, it was like, I'm just a person who doubts and doesn't have all of this faith that God requires of his people. And yet I know so much about him, and I thought I knew all about him in my life. And we begin to deny, and we begin to kind of cover up a lot of the pain that's in our life. And for many of us, this is kind of where we just begin to search for the evidence of where God is in the middle of this uncertainty and the unknown and in the mystery. And so we actually kind of see this in the scriptures. In the New Testament, in the book of Hebrews, there's an author who we don't even know who it is. It could be a man, it could be a woman who wrote this book called Hebrews. And it's somebody who's writing to early Christian believers. And a lot of these believers are beginning to turn off their Christian faith and revert back to Judaism because that's where they were comfortable with. And so this author's making all these appeals to these people, like, don't give up on your faith, don't turn around now, like, don't doubt Jesus and who he is. And so he makes all these appeals about the person of Jesus. And so he says, well, Jesus is actually a better high priest. I mean, in the Old Testament, there's a high priest who offered sins on behalf of the Israelites, but Jesus is a high priest who offers himself as a sacrifice for all people. That Jesus is actually better than Moses. Moses was a deliverer of the Israelite nation out of Egypt, but Jesus is a deliverer of all people. He says that the old covenant, that Jesus is a better covenant. He's the new covenant because the old covenant was 613 laws that only just brought death, and the new covenant's about Jesus who writes his laws in the seats of our hearts in the Holy Spirit, and it's life. And he came to bring dead hearts and bring them to life. And so Jesus, please do not fall away from the living God, and he makes all these appeals to people of what to do. And you can kind of tell, and this is kind of where we're going to pick up maybe some of the scripture today, is that a lot of these Christians were actually suffering a lot of persecution, and as they're trying to get convinced, the author reminds them of what it was like to be an early follower of Jesus. You feel me? Because a lot of times for so many of us, our faith, it's always when we first believed or when we first gave our life to Christ that it was so easy to do anything and take these big faith steps like Danny Cox. And so this is where we kind of pick up our story in Hebrews chapter 10. It says, think back on those early days when you first learned about Christ. When you first learned, remember how you remained faithful even though it meant terrible suffering. It's like, man, you were able to endure everything because it was like, man, you had that first love. And I think about when Jesus addresses some of his churches in the last book of Revelation, he's like, don't forget your first love. And for so many of us, we've kind of forgotten the first love. Because why? Because we realize that the life of faith is a race, and it takes so much endurance. And so he begins to talk about some of this endurance. He says, well, hey, sometimes some of you early Christians, you were exposed to public ridicule and you were beaten. And sometimes you helped others who were suffering the same things. You suffered along with those who were thrown into jail. And when all of you owned, your housing, your property was taken from you, you accepted it with joy. Because why? You knew that there were better things that were waiting for you that will last forever. And is this kind of true? Is that for some of us in our life, like the more that we've had that certainty and that sense of discovery of who God is, we have this belief that there's an eternal reward, that all of our suffering and all of our misery is worth it because there's a greater reward that's available to us. And so the author actually gives this definition of what allows so many of us in the life of faith to be able to keep pursuing, and it's the very definition of faith. And we hang this on our picture frames and our walls everywhere. But and for me, I always read this verse, and I don't know if you're like me, but I'm like really confused. I'm like, Bible language doesn't make sense. So I'm about to unpack it. So you with me? Yes. All right, come on. Feel free to shout me down. Give me an amen if you'd like to, by the way. So it says this in Hebrews chapter 11, verses 1a. Now faith is the assurance of things hoped for. It's the assurance, meaning that literally faith is a feeling that exists inside of you that gives you a sense of certainty. It's literally a feeling of assurance of the things that you hope for, of the outcome that you'd like to see in your life. Faith is the feeling that exists inside of you to tell you that you are going to receive that outcome. You with me? And he continues on, he says, faith is the evidence of things that are not seen. And then he kind of refers to creation, about how the invisible God spoke creation of the world, and so the visible creation is evidence of that which is unseen by God, who is the creator. Meaning this, that in God's economy, faith is actually evidence to God that the outcome that you're desiring to see is going to happen. And it's interesting because as you look through the New Testament, Jesus consistently talks about faith. In fact, it's about 12 times, at least 12 times, and maybe even more, that he refers to faith as some sort of currency for God's activity in the life of believers. He says, well, your faith has healed you, so go and make you well. There's a woman who's bleeding for 12 years, and she touches the hem of Jesus' garment, and she thinks she's in trouble, and she says, no, daughter, go in faith. Your faith has healed you. If you have faith in your heart, and you do not even doubt, and you say to this mountain to go throw yourself in the sea, it will be so. You can even have the faith of a mustard seed, and it blossom into the largest tree in the kingdom of heaven. It seems that in God's economy, faith is the currency and the transaction that we need to have in order to usher in God's activity in our life. And it's saying that faith is that actual evidence that God will do it. And so he's saying, have faith in the moments of the mystery. And so you actually see the author in chapter 11 right after this, and I'm not going to go into it, but I want to read you a list. But they go through like all of these examples of Old Testament heroes who had a moment of faith in their life that actually defined their life. And so he goes, hey, Abel in the Old Testament, who was the son of Adam in the very beginning in the Garden of Eden, he brought an acceptable sacrifice by faith, and God was pleased with him. He says that Noah built a huge ark in faith, hearing God's voice, that he would punish the sins of the world. In faith, Abraham offered up his son Isaac on the mountain, and it was credited to him as righteousness. In faith, Sarah, who was barren and couldn't have a child, believed in the promises of God, and so God gave her a child because of her faith. That Joseph, who is a leader in the land of Egypt, who was imprisoned by all of his brothers, by faith, he believed that the Israelites would go back from the land of Egypt and into the land of into the promised land, and he says, you can take my bones with you. And so by faith, it was made so that Moses, by faith, instead of just being raised up in the household of Pharaoh under Pharaoh's daughter, rather he decided to be a Hebrew like who he really was. By faith, Israel marched around Jericho and the walls came crumbling down. By faith, Rahab the prostitute, she hid friendly spies, and so she was spared. And so the author continues and says that by faith, these people, they overthrew kingdoms, ruled with justice, and received what God had promised them. They shut the mouths of lions, quenched the flames of fire, and escaped death by the edge of the sword. Their weakness was turned to strength. They became strong in battle and put whole armies to flight. Women received their loved ones back again from death. And I think what the author is saying is he's describing all these people, that the defining moment of your life will be the defying moment of faith in the middle of the mystery. That the defining moment, the description of your life will actually be the very moment where you had a faith-defying moment in the middle of the mystery. Is that all of these heroes of the faith, what do they have in common? Is that there was an outcome that was uncertain. And so for them, their life has a legacy because of a defying moment of faith. And I think for so many of us, when we look at the story that we're in, and we're in the middle of the mystery, and we deny what's really happening to us, it's not just about denying what's really happening to us. It's about defying the outcome. It's about rewriting the ending to the story. And maybe for some of us in here, it's actually needing to have a defining moment of choosing God and learning how to have faith in the middle of the mystery. However, it's so funny, and this is what's so funny about the Bible, is that right, it kind of stops and all these great heroes of the faith, but then it actually kind of turns around and it talks about how there's a whole list of people who actually didn't get the promise and they had faith anyways. The people actually died. The people didn't receive the reward. It says this, but others were tortured, refusing to turn from God in order to be set free. They placed their hope in a better life after the resurrection. Some were jeered at and their backs were cut open with whips. Others were chained in prison. Some died by stoning. Some were sawed in half. Others were killed with the sword. Some went about wearing skins of sheep and goats, destitute and oppressed and mistreated. And I'd like to suggest that, of course, in life, I wish that I could just promise this, that if we just had faith, you know, Jesus promised if you have the largest amount of faith that everything's going to happen, but at the same time, when you live by faith, sometimes it's not just about getting the promise. It's more about having the faith become the defining moment of you trusting God even when you shouldn't. And I think for so many of us, maybe we had a moment of faith and we feel betrayed by God because he didn't show up. And so in these moments, what's interesting about what the author of Hebrews says, it's in the moments where maybe we feel like God didn't show up, that all these people who suffered and got sawn in half and killed is they had a better reward, is that they actually had an eternal reward, and that was the reward for their faith. And it's interesting because then he actually begins to, or she, and the author, begins to talk about this reward, begins to talk about, well, what does it mean? And he actually talks about who. Who does this author talk about as the example of the person who we should be looking to? He talks about, or she talks about Jesus, begins to talk about how we have a king who was able to suffer and was the most unfair treatment of God in the history of all time, is that Jesus was perfect. He lived a perfect life. He had 100% of faith, and yet he suffered the greatest punishment. Is that Jesus, this is the reason why maybe some of us, we don't believe in like a karma God, is because Jesus was perfect and he received total punishment. He received wrath on the cross from a father. And the Hebrews, they looked at Jesus who's hanging on the cross, and they said, man, there's a man who's accursed by God, and he should be ashamed. And so there's this shame associated with the cross of Christ. And as the author, he begins to talk about all these Old Testament heroes and how because we have this cloud of witnesses, these people have gone before us, that we need to not take heart and rather throw off everything that's entangling us and then begin to look at Jesus. And so this is what this author says. Ready? Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a huge crowd of witnesses to the life of faith, let us strip off every weight that slows us down, especially the sin that so easily trips us up. And let us run with endurance the race that God has set before us. We do this by how? How do we do this? How do we endure? It's because you keep your eye on Jesus. It's like, man, as you're running your race, sometimes you forget the source. Like, he's the source of our endurance. He's the source of the person who keeps us going in the middle of the mystery. Because he was the person who suffered. He was the person who asked, God, if you can take this cup of wrath from me. And so what was Jesus' motivation? What actually kept him going through? And the author reveals it right in this next passage. And it may be not what you think it is, but are you ready to hear it? It says that this was Jesus' motivation. Come on, holla at me if you believe it. Because of the joy awaiting him. Because of the joy awaiting him. He endured the cross, disregarded its shame. Now he is seated in the place of honor beside God's throne that Jesus joyfully endured because of a better reward. The better reward is being glorified with his Father, but also being able to rescue his people. That he was the champion who initiates and perfects our faith. Is that Jesus joyfully endured for the better reward. And so for some of us, even if we're in the middle of the mystery and we have all this unknown, what's the better reward for your broken going to be? What is the better reward for your broken going to be? Who are the hearts that you're going to be able to champion? Who are the people that you're going to be able to relate with? Even if you don't get what's promised, even if you never received that type of breakthrough the exact way that you wanted, even if you never got exactly God's promises handed to you in the exact specific way that you were looking for, what is the better reward for your broken going to be? Who are the people that you're going to be able to really minister to? And so the question is, well, why do we have all this mystery anyways? I still don't understand why God would allow this. And you know what's so interesting about all this talk about faith? Is that faith, the one thing that God seems to be looking for the most, faith can only exist in the middle of the mystery. Or else you have total sight and you can see everything. It's in the middle of the mystery and the pain. Have you ever realized in life that trial and hardship and uncertainty produce some of the best characteristics in us, and comfort and ease and having enough produce some of the worst? And so sometimes I believe that God wants to get something from us that he couldn't just get with the angels and all the heavenly hosts, but he wanted to get something from people that even in the middle of the mystery, when they had no idea, that they would operate on a faith basis. They would operate even when they couldn't see what was in front of them, and that would actually give God the most joy. Because people would learn how to choose and love him and trust him even when they had absolutely no reason to. They defied their odds of their story. And they were able to walk with him. And so for me, I think about my life and all the doubt. And I lived kind of in wonderland of whether or not I was ever going to be able to get out of this. And it was kind of this weird time when I was 21. And I left college. And I was deciding whether I was going to go into ministry or I was, interviewing for some business jobs. And it was like a miniature defining moment where I said, you know what? Even though I feel awful inside and I don't feel like maybe this is the best time, I'm not going to go and put my blood, sweat, and tears into a business. And rather, instead, I'm going to go work in kids ministry and take a part-time job at Forever 21, which is torture in and of itself. So I did that. And it was in these moments, and I'm not trying to make any statement, but for me, there was more time that I spent probably in the mystery than I ever did in sight, where I felt like I overanalyzed everything. I'd be walking in the mall and questioning how God could individually know and love, and what about all these people? And then I'd be reading the Bible and measuring up against historical evidence and reliability issues and reading these textbooks, and I was just afraid to even be with God because it would be just painful. Because everything I, had, and it was actually just strange, just because of this one little tiny moment of faith, whereas I just positioned myself in the middle of people who loved my heart and who cared about me. And then it was inside of this where I actually saw God work supernaturally in ways that I didn't deserve. One of my roommates, and I'm not making a statement, but I believed he was actually healed of a degenerative disease right before my eyes, and I didn't believe it for a long time, and for years later, he's never had any symptoms since. There's another time I was praying over one of my students in the Edge ministry, and I actually believe that I heard the audible voice of Jesus speak to me, telling me to pray for her. And I really believe I felt the tangible, physical, literal presence of Jesus next to me. And if that's what that felt like, then nothing in my life felt like that. And it was in these silly moments of not really maybe getting the evidence that I needed to have or my questions answered, but it was actually just the evidence of his presence. And so sometimes I think it's when we say yes to God that we get the evidence of his presence. That's about getting him. It's about being with him. Sometimes more than getting your answers, it's just about being with him and connecting with him. I had a moment where I was teaching at our Orion campus, and I was talking about sharing your faith, and so a volunteer comes up to me and says, "Oh, I loved your message about sharing your faith and like really ministering to people, but I have someone that you should minister to." And I was like, "Well, I have to now." And so she goes, "Yeah, he's actually a young man. He's 23 years old, and he's actually dying of cancer right now. He had reconstructive tongue surgery, and he's got a tumor that wraps around the carotid artery, and they don't know if he's going to live or die. It's a 50-50 shot. But he wants to talk with someone about faith." And I was like, "Absolutely." And so I went to go visit this young man in the hospital, and come to learn in his story, his only other sibling, his younger brother, a few years earlier, had committed suicide. And so now his parents were losing their only son, and they had no business with God. They have no spiritual background. They've never been to church, and neither had this young man. And the reason why this young man actually reached out is because he believed that he saw a picture. He went into septic shock about a few months before that visit. He went into septic shock, and he believed he saw what images were of what we would call a hell. And he didn't know what it was. He didn't know what to do with this, and so he just saw this, and he began to reach out to some of the clergy in the hospital, and he hated their answers because they'd be like, "Well, it's just by faith." And he just hated these answers. And so finally, I come into this hospital, and I begin to talk to him and try to maybe give some comfort and connection. And he's having none of it. I mean, he's just totally defiant. And I was like, "Man, this isn't working. Man, I feel like I need to change my approach." And so I kind of asked him with one of my friends. I was like, "Hey, I mean, we could go toe-to-toe and talk about some of the stuff. But my heart is like, I just want to know how I can serve you. Like, what is it that you actually need?" And he goes, "You know what? I guess I don't really care about." He's like, "Yeah, the answers matter, and I want to make this decision to give my life to God when I feel really comfortable, but I guess something I really want to know is, what is it like? What is it like to believe in God again? What is it like for people who actually do this?" I said, "Oh my gosh." And so I was like, "Well, do you mind if I pray with you?" And we kind of prayed, and he began to cry, and tears were flowing down his face, and his family actually walked in the room, and so we had to leave, and it was like, he just had this overwhelming peace, like that he felt like he was actually with God for the first time maybe in his life. So we began to follow up and text him, and sure enough, he goes, "I felt like the door was open, and I just didn't know what to do next." And so we were talking to him, and he comes to Kensington one week, and we kind of don't see him for a long time, and we're texting, trying to meet up with him and just give him some answers and comfort. And finally, we just go, me and some of my team, we go over to his apartment and just sit there, and he's about to get this treatment done. And we just have this conversation. He's kind of backwards. He's like, "I don't really believe this." And I kind of, after 45 minutes of going back and forth, I said, "Honestly, man, I'm just going to let you know, like, I don't know when or if I'll see you again, and so I'm just going to say this. Either you're going to make this decision now, or you're not." And it kind of put the reality of, like, I need to make a decision, and it put that urgency. And he gave his life to Christ on that spot, and we prayed with him, and he wept, and he invited God to be, he didn't just want God to be on the outside of his house, but he wanted to be inside and actually get to know him and be in a relationship. And when he was done, he was like, "Man, I just feel like I've made my peace. I feel like that's exactly what I needed to do." And he ended up dying on Christmas Day. Now, talk about a young man who placed his faith in God, and the outcome didn't come. But it's when you say yes to God that sometimes you get the evidence of his presence instead. Is that I know for my friend is that he got him. Is that he got the Father. And so my question today is, in whatever mystery that you're in, what's your defining moment of faith? That you'll look back in your life and God will be able to say, and that moment right there is the moment that I knew that you were all in, that regardless of the outcome, you defied the odds and you rewrote your story. what is the better reward for your broken going to be? So right now, I want us to watch this video. It's a story of a girl, and she's literally blind. And I hope that maybe we can begin to parallel some of this with our life of what it actually means to be walking with God, because something that I've learned is this. I heard this example. What's the point of a dance? What's the point of a song? Was it just to get done as fast as you could with this dance so that you could be done? And that's how we view life, is if I just get to my destination faster. But the whole point of a dance isn't that you just get done. The whole point of a dance is the dance itself. It's the journey that you're chest to chest with Him and walking in the mystery. And so I want you to watch this and think about the dance between you and your Father.
Grass is soft, like the angel hair pasta, grass kind of resembles that. I guess, just, I don't know. I've been blind since birth. I have a disease called Leber's congenital amaurosis. People often ask me, you know, is it hard being blind? Is it scary? And it's not. It's just a normal way of life for me. There was a time in my life when I was angry about being blind. I was very into makeup and trying to look my best. I really wanted to look in the mirror and see what I looked like, but I couldn't. The Lord spoke to me and He told me that I am beautiful on the inside and that I don't have to worry about what I look like on the outside, and that He is the only one who can tell me what I look like. The mirror can't. Sometimes I feel like I'm a little bit of a burden to people.
See right in front of you, girl.
Sometimes I wish I didn't really need that much help. I wish that I didn't have to rely on them.
Okay, got everything, Liz?
Yep.
All right, we're out the front door this time.
Alrighty. I'll break too. If I could see, I don't think my faith would be as strong. Because for a blind person, you have to rely on the Lord. It's like your faith becomes more real because you're used to not seeing things. You're used to believing in someone that you can't see. Like, for example, my mom, I can't see her. I may be able to hear her, but even if I couldn't, I can't see her, but I know she's there. So for me, I think it's easier to know and to understand that though I can't see God, He's really there. I think it has a lot to do with walking by faith and not by sight. I have this desire to help people, but I feel like being blind sort of limits me as to what I can do. But the reality is, God has given me a gift of singing for Him and leading worship, and I feel like that's my way of helping people. And I'm grateful for that. I have so much joy and so much anticipation because I know that the first face I'm ever going to see is Jesus, and that means the world to me.
O Lord of my heart, not be all else to me, save that thou art. Thou my best Lord, by day or by night, waking or sleeping, thy presence my light. Be thou my vision, O Lord of my heart, not be all else to me, save that thou art. Thou my best Lord, by day or by night, waking or sleeping, thy presence, thy light. Walking around these walls, I thought by now they'd fall, but you have never failed me yet. Waiting for change to come, knowing the battle's won, for you have never failed me yet. Your promise still stands, great is your faithfulness, faithfulness. I'm still in your hands, this is my confidence, you've never failed me yet. I know the night won't last, your word will come to pass. My heart will sing your praise again. Jesus, you're still enough. Keep me within your love. My heart will sing your praise again. Promise still stands, great is your faithfulness, faithfulness. Sing it out. I've seen you move the mountains, and I believe I see you do it again. You made a way when there was no way, and I believe I'll see you do it again. I've seen you move the mountains, and I believe I'll see you do it again. You made a way when there was no way, and I believe I'll see you do it again. I've seen you move the mountains, and I believe I'll see you do it again. You made a way when there was no way, and I believe I'll see you do it again. I'll see you do it again. Whoa, you do it again. Your promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness, faithfulness. I'm still in your hands. This is my confidence. You never fail. Your promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness, faithfulness. I'm still in your hands. This is my confidence. You never fail me yet. You never failed me yet.
Dear Heavenly Father, man, we come to you and we just want to believe that you're going to do it again. And sometimes it's so easy to be looking for what you are going to do or how we haven't been met by you in this way, but rather, God, we need to remember what you have done in our lives and count the moments that we've seen you show up time and time again. But it's in these moments that we realize that you were there the whole time. It's in the moments that, by keeping our eyes on you, Jesus, that we get to endure the race and that we get to participate in your suffering and sit in the mystery and that draws us closer and closer to you because of the pure, simple truth that we need you. And so, Lord, we ask that you would do it again in our life, that you would be our vision, that you would give us great discovery, that you would give us breakthrough, God, that you'd give us the faith to have the breakthrough. And some of us, we have unbelief, but Lord, help our unbelief. And let us always remember that you are the God of miracles and the God of second chances. In your name, amen. Well, thanks so much, everyone, for coming out. If you feel like you need any prayer of any type, we have a prayer team, I believe, that comes down. It's at the front of the room if you'd like to pray about anything or even have a conversation. And for those of you who are maybe a first-time guests or with us, we'd love to meet you at our starting point table out in the back. And don't forget about some of our serving opportunities like standing in the gap and also talking to our student team volunteers. We're so excited. We'll be back for week 3 defining moments next week. Thanks so much, everybody. See you.